This is MCR News Insight. I'm Mayank Chaya. The 77th United Nations General Assembly, which began its session on September 20th, will go down in history as one where a Secretary General made perhaps the bleakest speech on the state of the planet. The 25-minute plus address on September 20th by António Guterres stood out for how profoundly worried humanity should be about all-round existential crises it faces.
We need action across the board. Let's have no illusions. We are in rough seas. A winter of global discontent is on the horizon. A cost of living crisis is raging. Trust is crumbling. Inequalities are exploding. And our planet is burning. People are hurting, with the most vulnerable suffering the most. The United Nations Charter and the ideals it represents are in jeopardy. We have a duty to act, and yet we are gridlocked in colossal global dysfunction. The international community is not ready or willing to tackle the big, dramatic challenges of our age. This crisis threatens the very future of humanity and the fate of our planet.
Guterres then specifically listed the crises that he thinks pose a direct challenge to the future of humanity.
Crises like the war in Ukraine and the multiplication of conflicts around the globe. Climates like the climate emergency and biodiversity loss. Crises like the dire financial situation of developing countries and the fate of the Sustainable Development Goals. And crises like the lack of guardrails around promising new technologies to heal disease, connect people, and expand opportunity. In just the time since I became Secretary General, a tool has been developed to edit genes. Neurotechnology, connecting technology with the human nervous system, has progressed from idea to proof of concept. Cryptocurrencies and other blockchain technologies are widespread, but across a host of new technologies there is a forest of red flags. Social media platforms based on a business model that monetizes outrage, anger, and negativity are causing untold damage to communities and societies. Hate speech, misinformation, and abuse, targeted especially at women and vulnerable groups, are proliferating. Our data is being bought and sold to influence our behavior, while spyware and surveillance are out of control, all with no regard for privacy. Artificial intelligence can compromise the integrity of information systems, the media, and indeed, democracy itself. Quantum computing could destroy cybersecurity and increase the risk of malfunctions to complex systems. We don't have the beginnings of a global architecture to deal with any of these. Excellencies, progress on these issues and more is being held hostage by geopolitical tensions. Our world is in peril and paralyzed. Geopolitical divides are undermining the work of the Security Council, undermining international law, undermining trust and people's faith in democratic institutions, undermining all forms of international cooperation. We cannot go on like this.
The Secretary General reserved the harshest warning for the consequences of climate change, calling it, in quote, our suicidal war against nature, unquote. In his tenure so far that began on January 1st, 2017, Guterres has been remarkably candid in all his warnings and counsels. But so far, those have not moved the needle much in the direction he thinks it ought to go.
There is another battle we must end, our suicidal war against nature. The climate crisis is the defining issue of our time, and it must be the first priority of every government and multilateral organization. And yet, climate action is being put on the back burner, despite overwhelming public support around the world. Global greenhouse gas emissions need to be slashed by 45% by 2030 to have any hope of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. And yet emissions are going up at record levels, on course to a 14% increase this decade. We have a rendezvous with climate disaster.
This is MCR News Insight. I'm Mayank Chaya.